Hello and welcome back to On Volume 6, a channel designed around bridging the gap between orthodox Jungian psychological functions and psychological types with the objective personality systems theory of how type mechanics work and what type of constructs should be included and disincluded and adopted as we build an understanding of what makes a psychological function versus what makes a psychological type. So what are we talking about? We're talking about some of the most difficult items that I've had to go through in terms of making this channel and making content for this channel. I decided to start with title first content. And this one really took a stop with where I was at, where I started in terms of visualizing an objective personality system type. Start with self-type. Write out. Use most recent issued OPS type until population develops suitable scale intelligence in identifying coins. Suitable scale intelligence in identifying coins, functions, or types. And so, visualizing types. So I want you to be able to visualize types, or I want you to be able to understand what I'm talking about when I talk about where I started in terms of visualizing an objective personality system type. So I started here in terms of formal notation. But I wanted to write out each of my functions. I wanted to write out my functions, and this is what I got in terms of common notation. So what does this mean? We're talking about 1 to 2 OENT consume. We're talking about 2 to 4 DIST sleep. We're talking about 3 to 4 DESF blast. We're talking about 1 to 3 OENF play. And we have to create this bridge in between psychological functions and psychological types so that I can explain it to a large language model, so that I can explain it to other individuals as they make an assumption. Okay, so what are we even talking about here? Talking about visualizing a type in the objective personality system, but we haven't even defined our characteristics in terms of formal notation versus common notation. So what does MF mean? MF stands for masculine feminine. It stands for the notation for where a psychological function is located in terms of your first and your second. First and second one. First and second point of differentiation in terms of the modalities. And what are the first and second points of differentiation in terms of modalities? We're dealing with whether or not your extroverted observer is sensory. Right? So we're talking about sensory first. Sensory first. If it's a masculine, then it's masculine sensory. If it's feminine, then it's a feminine sensory. We're talking about the first. We're talking about the first item here. Uh-oh. So that's where we're at. Where I started in terms of visualizing an objective personality system type. This is important because we started with ourselves. And we started off by writing out an orthodox Jungian psychological type stack, question mark, a typological function stack in terms of common notation because we wanted to visualize an OPS system type. But in order to visualize, we can't start with common notation. We have to start with formal notation. And that's what it means to visualize a type in the objective personality system. This right here is a type in the objective personality system. This right here is a type. These right here, they are functions. 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 What are we talking about? We're talking about Jungian theory. We're talking about objective personality theory. How did we get here from orthodox Jungian psychological functions to objective personality psychological functions? We split them. We took on a splitter's conceptualization of the world in a split second. They split the functions. Now you're saying to yourself, okay, well, how is that possible? What does that mean? I'm saying that Jung's theoretical basis was so solid that all they had to do was take on a splitter's perspective to split the functions in terms of a lumpers versus a splitters argument, in terms of a typological argument to make a theory of the claim for why a schism might be introduced. We start with psychological functions versus psychological types because we need to make it clear. We need to make it absolutely clear. What are we talking about specifically? And how can you visualize this? So I gave you a way to visualize it 3 different ways. In terms of formal notation. Alright, I'm giving you one way to visualize it. In terms of formal notation. MF, NETI, consume, sleep, blast, play. Number 3, social type. But now you need to get a chance to understand the rotational access component when it comes to the visualization of a psychological function and the visualization of a psychological type. As you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, we're linking up functions, meaning based on the size of the bubble. It represents the function's differentiation level. We're starting with 1 to 2, NE to TI, feminine NE to masculine TI. 1 to 2, OE, because that's the point of directionality in terms of what's the lead function. Sometimes we might say 1 to 2 OE NT consume. Sometimes we might say OE 1 to 2 NT consume. That directionality and that ordinance sometimes gets interposed. And it can get difficult to understand it in terms of common notation. That's why we speak of it as common notation, because formal notation has yet to rule on what it thinks should be a more granular mode of identifying the ordinance and the directionality of the specific functions being used to make reference to the functions that a specific type is using. because a specific psychological type uses specific psychological functions, and they're not all the same. Two different people can be using the same type of NT consume, and two different people can be using two different types of NT consume. Technically, there are 4 types of NT consume, at least. You have OE NT consume. You have DI NT consume. Both 1 to 2. And then you have 3 to 4 OE NT consume, and you have 3 to 4 DI NT consume. So at least 4. Could probably multiply that to 8. Where would that information be? To get an understanding of what that difference looks like, what that difference sounds like, what that difference smells like in terms of psychological functions and psychological types. I started this off making an attempt to answer the question where I started in terms of visualizing an objective personality system type. 512. And I'm telling you that I couldn't start here. I couldn't start here. It was messing me up. It was throwing me off. I could not start there. I had to start with being objectively assessed in a time period where they had stronger versus weaker typing skills in terms of coming to common core consensus. So we made an attempt to say MF, masculine sensory, feminine extroverted decider. And now we're going to have to do a course on this denotation. We're going to have to do a course on this denotation. Pause. Okay, I thought I was going to do a little bit more, but I got bullied out of my own imagination, so to speak. So we're going to dial into masculine sensory, feminine extroverted decider. And then the first pairing, meaning is this a jumper or is this a regular type? And even that could be a misnomer because we don't know whether or not jumpers are considered regular or if that's just common convention in terms of orthodox Jungian theory. So NE goes to TI instead of NE going to FE. That would be the jumper. And then we have consume, sleep, blast, play. That is the connections. The connections between functions. This is a highly important point for you to get, and we're going to pick this back up in our next entry so that you can make sure to drill it into your psyche. What is the difference between a psychological function and a psychological type? What are we talking about? We're talking about Jungian theory. We're talking about objective personality theory. We're talking about psychological function. We're talking about psychological type. We're talking about common notation, formal notation, and we even may make it to theory, structure, and applications / practice. Until next time.